Local Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz, he graduated from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and after the Parkland massacre, he worked as a state lawmaker to help lead successful efforts to craft new school and gun safety laws. Those included a red flag law, allowing police to get a civil order barring someone deemed dangerous to themselves or others from having or buying guns, at least temporarily, as long as the order's in place. I asked Congressman Moskowitz for his thoughts in the wake of the mass shootings in Maine.
Here are two responses that we should not do. The response that we should not do is we shouldn't just pray. I think prayer is important, but it shouldn't just be, oh, we'll pray. Like somehow if we just pray, all the mentally ill people will stop getting AR-15s. So that can't just be the only thing we do. Simultaneously, the response isn't we should confiscate everybody's guns. That's also not the proper response, because that also will go nowhere. Obviously, we have the Second Amendment. And so why we can't have a real conversation around mentally ill people getting access to military-style weapons, right? Focus on the consistent problem, mental health problems and weapons together. Why we can't have that conversation like red flag laws, which we did in Florida, which are working, have been used, 7,000, 8,000 times now in the state of Florida. No one's marching in the street that their Second Amendment rights are violated. Raising the age wouldn't be a help in this instance, but it's on a lot of mass shootings that it has helped on raising the age. Background checks, obviously. There are things we can do that don't affect law-abiding gun owners, doesn't affect the Second Amendment. And if you're not mentally ill, won't affect you either.
Governor Ron DeSantis speaking out, saying he would not nationalize Florida's red flag law if he became president. In fact, he opposes Florida's red flag law, though it does remain on the books.
So I don't think it's an issue with red flag. I think red flag has been abused because people can just lodge a complaint. Sometimes they'll take somebody's firearms. And here's the thing. It's not even Second Amendment as much as a Fifth Amendment due process issue. Can you take someone's property without having an adjudication? So I think it's different. I don't think it would have mattered in this case. I do think a commitment, an involuntary commitment, would have done the trick. But I think what's ultimately effective is holding people accountable, either through mental adjudication if they're crazy, or convicting them when they're committing crimes.
Brian Crowley here, as always. Brian, thank you. By the way, some 19, 20 states, depending on the definition, have some form of red flag law. Florida included after Parkland. Jared Moskowitz, of course, helped lead the way on that. Brian, thoughts? We've got a debate coming up in Miami, GOP candidates, and certainly this topic is likely to very much be front and center yet again.
Well, I mean, there's a certain irony to the governor, opposing any kind of stronger legislation about guns and protecting people from people that may have mental health issues. This is a guy who every day, he and his family, no matter where they go, have their personal security detail, the FDLE, around them wherever they go. They have guards at the governor's mansion. He's a pretty well protected guy. The state legislature is about to spend tens of millions of dollars to install bulletproof windows in the 22-story Capitol. Obviously the red flag laws can help. You're identifying somebody that may be having mental health issues, who may be talking about violence, to have a system where you can check people out and make sure that they're not a threat to schools or nightclubs, the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, or with the horror that's going on in Maine. I mean, at some point, nobody's talking about taking away guns from law-abiding citizens. We're talking about protecting law-abiding citizens from people who might have mental disabilities.
We want to also speak today about the fact you and I will be covering the GOP presidential debate coming up in just under 2 weeks' time. And Brian, whether it's the mass shootings in Maine and therefore the discussion about other mass shootings, including Parkland, Pulse, Uvalde, Sandy Hook, the list sadly goes on and on and on, whether it's that, the war by Israel against Hamas, so much there, and it really changes the landscape and dynamic of the discussion. Talk about the debate, talk about where it is Miami, that's not just by happenstance, and your thoughts generally before we dive a little more specifically into that.
Well, of course, once again, Donald Trump is not participating in the debate. He's going to have his own rally in Hialeah during the
nearby
debate.
Hialeah.
You know, the interesting thing about the debate to me is that I think the party is finally getting to the point where if they're going to have a number 2 candidate, it's kind of boiled down to Ron DeSantis and perhaps Nikki Haley. I think the other candidates are basically running for vice president. And,
aren't they too? Because the numbers just don't show there's any real chance for anybody that Donald Trump's just way too far ahead, notwithstanding your aversion to polls.
Well, you know, my biggest thing I'll say about polls, national polls mean nothing. The only thing that means anything is Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. The fact that they're in Miami, heavily Hispanic, I think that's not coincidence. They want to do really well with Hispanic voters throughout the country because that can make a difference in winning in some swing states. Not going to make much difference in Florida. Florida's gone very, very red.
I was looking at battleground states the other day. Very interesting. Florida not even remotely mentioned anymore.
Yeah, the 2000 election seems so far away, 537 votes.
For DeSantis, last chance to make first impressions, or are we really just sort of ticking down to what the dynamics will be at 2024 and where he goes next? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think what Ron DeSantis needs to do at this debate is take off the cowboy boots, relax, quit lecturing the audience, quit trying to sound like the smartest guy in the room, and show a personality. Be human, smile, you know, laugh a little bit, have a good time. He tends to talk as if he's a college professor annoyed with his class.
Last quick question for you, Brian. Wendy Sartori-Link, credited with really turning around a lot of the issues that have been going on with Palm Beach County all the way back to 2000, fairly or unfairly, for many, many years was tainted with a brush about problems with elections in Palm Beach County. As we look what's going on, Florida, lauded by the Republicans who put in tougher rules, we'll be talking to people in the next coming weeks and months who think that minority communities have been disenfranchised. But I thought it was important today to at least hear about the dynamics of how you vote. But I'll let you speak to the broader issues. Florida now being held up as an example. Your thoughts about the election process, so much will be riding on the faith people have in that come 2024.
Oh, I think it's really important that we have people like Wendy that are running elections in counties all over the state. She's very, very good at what she does. She's very good at messaging so that people understand what they have to do. She's very good at doing voter outreach. And I think that, you know, she's very good at building confidence in voters in Palm Beach County that you feel like what's happening is going to be fair. Now, what we need to not have is people showing up at the polls to protest, to interfere with people voting, to, you know, make a lot of noise as the voting is taking place. You know, let's be civil about it and do it right.
Brian, as always, plenty of things for you and I to talk about in the coming months. Of course, you and I will be covering the debate together in just less than 2 weeks' time, and we'll be back with Brian's closing thoughts in a moment.